What would you do if you found yourself standing at the crossroads of despair and redemption with a voice that could echo across the darkest valleys of grief? This is the silent cry of Thomas, a man whose life has been shattered by tragedy, yet whose voice remains a beacon of hope for others lost in their own shadows. In the quiet town of Newnan, Georgia, where history intertwines with modern life, one fateful encounter will forever alter the paths of two men, one searching for purpose and the other for solace. Thomas, a once vibrant soul, now wanders the streets with a haunting melody that clings to the air like a ghost. Disheveled and weary, he clutches a battered guitar, its strings worn thin, much like his spirit. The townspeople know him not as a man seeking help, but as a fixture, a fleeting shadow that drifts through the town square, singing old gospel hymns that resonate with a depth of emotion that belies his circumstances. In his eyes, however, there lies a vulnerability that speaks of loss, heartache, and a longing for connection. Once a promising worship leader, Thomas had dreams that soared beyond the confines of his small town, but those dreams were extinguished in the flames of a tragic house fire that took his wife and daughter from him, leaving him adrift in a sea of grief. As he strums his guitar, the chords weave a tapestry of sorrow and beauty, capturing the attention of passers-by. Among them is Alan Jackson, a name synonymous with country music, who has returned to his roots for a brief respite. As he strolls through the historic downtown district, he stops near the old courthouse, where the notes of Thomas's voice cut through the noise of everyday life, raw and powerful. Alan's heart quickens, not just from the beauty of the music, but from the palpable pain that lingers in each note. He approaches the man, initially drawn by curiosity, but soon finds himself compelled by a deeper understanding of the struggles that lie beneath the surface. Their conversation begins tentatively, each word a tentative bridge being built over an ocean of shared loss. Alan learns that Thomas had once been filled with dreams of leading a congregation in worship, of spreading joy through the gift of song. The fire that took everything from him also extinguished the light in his eyes, leaving behind a man hesitant to hope again. Alan sees the flicker of potential that remains, a spark waiting to be reignited, and he is determined to help Thomas find his way back to the music that once defined him. The scenario in Newnan is a microcosm of the broader struggles faced by many in society. The town bears witness to the harsh realities of homelessness and mental health issues, often met with judgment or indifference. The streets are filled with stories of people like Thomas, who have fallen through the cracks of a system that promises hope but often delivers despair. The conflict is not just external, but deeply internal, as Thomas battles the demons of his past, anxiety, guilt, and the fear of being seen. The very act of stepping back into the world of music feels like an insurmountable challenge, one that he fears may further expose him to the pain of rejection and the weight of past failures. As he grapples with these feelings, the connection between Thomas and Alan deepens. Alan, too, reflects on his own life and career, the fame and success that have come with a price. He understands the fragility of dreams and the ease with which they can slip away. Through their shared experiences, they forge an unexpected friendship, one built on mutual respect and understanding, and Alan becomes more than just a mentor. He becomes a lifeline for Thomas. He arranges for Thomas to receive food, a haircut, and new clothes, all while encouraging him to embrace the gift he has nearly forgotten. The emotional weight of Thomas's trauma is evident as he prepares for his first performance in years. The auditorium, though filled with familiar faces, feels like an alien landscape. The fear of judgment gnaws at him, but Alan's steady presence reassures him. When the moment finally arrives and Thomas takes the stage, the world seems to stand still. He grips the microphone, his hands trembling, and as he opens his mouth to sing, a wave of raw emotion pours forth, silencing the entire room. The haunting beauty of his voice captures the audience, leaving them spellbound. In that moment, it's not just a song, it's a resurrection of hope and healing. Alan captures the performance on his phone, sharing it with the world alongside. A heartfelt caption that encapsulates Thomas's journey. This man's voice carries more than a melody. It carries pain, loss, and grace. The video spreads like wildfire, igniting a movement of empathy and support that transcends geographical boundaries. People from all walks of life are drawn to Thomas's story, moved by his resilience and the power of his music. Donations pour in, and news outlets clamor to tell his tale. But with this newfound attention comes an avalanche of challenges. The sudden spotlight shines brightly, but it casts long shadows. Thomas finds himself grappling with anxiety and the weight of expectation. The very thing that once brought him joy now feels like a burden, and he wrestles with feelings of guilt. Guilt for allowing himself to be seen, for accepting help, and for the pain that still lingers in his heart. Alan stands by him, guiding him through therapy and encouraging him to use music as a form of healing. Together, they navigate the complexities of fame, friendship, and the internal struggle for redemption. As the climax approaches, the local benefit show looms on the horizon. Alan invites Thomas to join him on stage for a duet of amazing grace, a song that encapsulates their shared journey of loss and healing. The moment is not about spectacle, it's about authenticity, about two men connecting through their shared pain and triumph. As they perform, the audience is enveloped in a profound stillness, tears streaming down many faces, a collective recognition of the beauty and fragility of life. In the aftermath, the impact of their performance ripples through the community. Thomas finds his voice not just as a singer, but as a mentor, dedicating his time to helping at-risk youth discover their own potential through music. He becomes a symbol of hope and resilience, reminding others that even in the depths of despair, there is a chance for rebirth. Ultimately, this story is not just about music, it's about friendship, healing, and the power of human connection. It challenges us to consider our own vulnerabilities and the ways in which we can uplift those around us, reminding us that sometimes the most profound transformations arise from the ashes of our darkest moments. In the heart of Newnan, Georgia, two men find each other in their shared struggles, proving that even in the face of overwhelming loss, hope can be rekindled and dreams can rise anew. The days following Thomas's transformative performance were a whirlwind of excitement and anxiety. Initially, the flood of attention felt like a lifeline, a chance to emerge from the shadows that had cloaked him for so long. But as the euphoria began to fade, he found himself grappling with the weight of expectations and the fear of failing those who had rallied around him. The very spotlight that had illuminated his path now cast daunting shadows that loomed over him, whispering doubts that he had thought he had buried. The first challenge emerged in the form of a local music festival, where Thomas was invited to perform alongside more established artists. The thought of stepping onto a larger stage sent waves of panic crashing over him. Memories of the fire that had stolen his family felt closer than ever, and he could almost hear the flames crackling in the background of his mind. He began to question whether he had the strength to face an audience again, especially one that would expect him to deliver more than just a performance. They wanted a story of triumph, a narrative he wasn't sure he could embody. Alan, who had become a steadfast ally, sensed the turmoil brewing beneath Thomas's surface. He encouraged him to practice, to channel his fears into his music, but Thomas struggled to find the right notes. One evening, as they sat in Alan's living room, Thomas's hands trembled over his guitar strings. What if I freeze? What if they see me for who I really am, just a broken man pretending to be whole? He confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. Alan, leaning back in his chair, considered his friend's words carefully. You're not pretending, Thomas. You're here, you're alive, and that's enough. Try to focus on the music, on the message you want to share. Remember, vulnerability can be powerful. But Thomas wasn't convinced. The self-doubt that had been his constant companion since the fire wrapped around him like a shroud, suffocating his resolve. He found himself withdrawing, opting for solitary walks around Newnan instead of joining Alan for rehearsals. The streets, once a backdrop for his music, now felt like a maze of reminders, echoing with laughter and life that he felt he could never reclaim. During one of these walks, he encountered Lisa, a woman in her late 20s who had fallen on hard times. She sat on a bench, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, staring into the distance. Thomas recognized the sorrow in her eyes. It mirrored his own. He approached cautiously, offering her a warm smile. "Hey there, mind if I sit?" Lisa looked up, startled, but nodded. As they exchanged stories, Thomas learned that she had lost her job and was struggling to keep her apartment. Despite her struggles, Lisa had a fierce determination that Thomas found both inspiring and daunting. "You have to keep fighting, you know. Life can get better, but you have to take the first step," she urged, her voice steady. Thomas felt a flicker of recognition in her words, a reflection of the encouragement Alan had given him. But instead of feeling motivated, he found himself retreating further into his fears. What did he have to offer someone like Lisa? He was still fighting his own battles, and the thought of being a beacon for someone else felt overwhelming. Days turned into weeks, and the festival loomed closer. With each passing day, Thomas felt the pressure mounting. The whispers of doubt grew louder, and the burden of expectation became heavier. Alan's patience began to wane as he noticed Thomas pulling away, the connection they had built now strained by the weight of unspoken fears. "You're going to let your past define you, aren't you?" Alan challenged one evening, frustration evident in his tone. "You're stronger than this, Thomas. Don't give in to the darkness." But Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that he was just a shadow of who he used to be, a man unworthy of the spotlight. The thought of letting down those who believed in him filled him with dread. He found himself questioning his ability to rise above the ashes of his past. Would he be able to confront the audience without collapsing under the weight of their expectations? The night of the festival arrived, and the air crackled with anticipation. Thomas stood backstage, his heart pounding in rhythm with the thumping bass of the music echoing from the main stage. He could hear laughter, cheers, and the sound of instruments tuning. Each noise felt like a reminder of his inadequacy, a reminder that he was merely an imposter in this world of talent and celebration. As the announcer called his name, a wave of panic washed over him. He could feel the warmth of the stage lights piercing through his skin, and for a moment he considered turning back, escaping into the shadows once more. But then he remembered Lisa, the way she had fought against her circumstances, the determination that had glowed in her eyes. He thought of Alan, who had stood by him through the chaos, believing in a man who had nearly lost his way. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the spotlight. The audience erupted in applause, their faces a blur of excitement. As he took hold of the microphone, his hands shook violently, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he might crumble. But then he closed his eyes, letting the familiar chords of his guitar wash over him, grounding him in the moment. He began to sing, pouring every ounce of pain, hope, and longing into the notes that escaped him. Each line was a thread weaving together the tapestry of his journey. As he sang, he felt the weight of his fears begin to lift, the music enveloping him like a warm embrace. The audience swayed, captivated by the raw emotion that resonated in his voice. But just as he began to feel a sense of liberation, a sudden flicker of doubt crept in. What if this was just a fleeting moment? What if he couldn't sustain this newfound connection with music? The fear threatened to choke him, and he faltered, his voice wavering. The audience, sensing his struggle, grew silent, a collective breath held in anticipation. In that moment of vulnerability, he realized that his journey wasn't about perfection. It was about being real, about embracing the pain and uncertainty. He took a deep breath, allowing the music to flow freely once more, this time with a clarity that came from acceptance. The performance ended to thunderous applause, but Thomas was left standing, breathless and trembling, overwhelmed by the emotional release. He had faced his fears, but the inner conflict was far from over. As he stepped off the stage, the applause still ringing in his ears, he knew that the real battle lay ahead, a fight to reclaim his sense of self and to navigate the complexities that fame would bring. In the days that followed, Thomas found himself grappling with the aftermath of his performance. The videos shared online ignited a wave of support, but alongside the praise came criticism and judgment as well. He read through the comments, feeling the sting of negativity that mixed with the sweetness of encouragement. It was a constant reminder that the world could be both beautiful and cruel, and he had to be ready to face both sides. Alan remained a steadfast presence, but even he was feeling the pressure. The festival's success drew attention, and suddenly, everyone wanted to collaborate with Thomas. New opportunities surged forward, but with them came the reality of potential exploitation. Thomas found himself surrounded by people who saw him as a project rather than a person. It was disheartening, and he often retreated into himself, unsure of who he could trust. Then, one evening, he received a call from a producer in Nashville, offering him a record deal. The excitement was palpable, yet Thomas felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. Was he ready for this? Would he be able to navigate the industry without losing himself again? He confided in Alan, who encouraged him to take the leap, reminding him that this could be a chance to share his story on a grander scale. But Lisa's words echoed in his mind, urging him to remain true to himself. He thought about the struggles they had both faced and how the music industry could easily swallow someone whole if they weren't careful. This internal conflict grew, pulling him in two directions: the desire for success and the fear of losing his authenticity. As the weeks passed, Thomas found himself at a crossroads once again. The pressure mounted as he prepared for a meeting with the producer, and he wrestled with the idea of what success meant to him. The allure of fame was intoxicating, yet the thought of sacrificing his values and his connection to the community filled him with dread. The day of the meeting arrived, and as he stood outside the sleek office building, he felt the weight of his journey resting heavily on his shoulders. He took a moment to breathe, allowing the memories of his past to guide him. He had faced the flames before, he could face this too. Inside the room, the producer greeted him with enthusiasm, presenting glossy images of potential album covers and a vision for a music career that sparkled with promise. But as the conversation unfolded, Thomas felt his instincts kicking in. The producer spoke of trends and marketability, of changing his sound to fit a mold. "I want to tell my story," Thomas replied, his voice firm. "I don't want to compromise who I am for the sake of success. I want to create music that resonates with people struggling like I have." The producer's smile faltered, and, for a moment, Thomas feared he had blown his chance. But then he realized that this was a defining moment. He could choose to stand firm in his beliefs or allow himself to be swayed by the allure of fame. As he left the meeting, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced the moment Thomas stepped into the world outside the producer's office. He felt a rush of clarity. He had made a choice, one that resonated deeply within him. But as he walked back to his car, a creeping dread returned, reminding him that the path forward wouldn't be easy. He had defied expectations, but now he would have to face the consequences of that decision. This was only the beginning of a more complicated journey. In the days that followed, the excitement of his newfound determination was overshadowed by the realities of the music industry. The buzz from the festival began to fade, replaced by a chilling silence. Thomas watched as his social media following fluctuated, a roller coaster of likes and comments that sometimes felt more like a performance than an authentic connection. While some praised his raw honesty, others criticized him for not conforming to the industry's polished image. The duality of praise and criticism weighed heavily on him, spiraling into a toxic mix of anxiety and self-doubt. Then, just as he was trying to regain his footing, a scandal broke out involving one of the artists he admired. A video surfaced that showed the artist making derogatory comments about an underrepresented community. The backlash was instantaneous and brutal. Thomas watched as the media painted a picture of the music industry as an unforgiving arena, one where mistakes could lead to devastating consequences. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. If a beloved figure could fall so quickly, what did that mean for him? He had already faced his demons. Now he had to confront the ghosts of others' failures. Alan, who had been a pillar of support, began to show signs of strain as well. The pressure of Thomas's choices weighed on him, and he expressed concerns about the direction Thomas was taking. "You need to consider how this industry works, Thomas," Alan said one evening as they sat in his living room, the air thick with tension. "It's not just about your story. It's about how you fit into the narrative they want to create. You can't ignore that." Thomas felt a pang of frustration. "But I want to tell my story. I don't want to be another pawn in their game," he shot back, his voice rising with emotion. They had been allies, but now their differing perspectives threatened the foundation of their friendship. The rift was palpable, and for the first time, Thomas wondered if he could trust Alan's counsel, or if he was merely projecting his own fears onto his friend. As the weeks rolled on, the uncertainty began to seep into other areas of Thomas's life. The fallout from the scandal made him more conscious of his own image, leading him to question every word he wrote, every note he played. He found himself staring at blank pages for hours, the pressure to create something meaningful suffocating his creativity. The fear of missteps loomed larger than ever, and with every passing day, his resolve began to fray. Then, one fateful night, he received a call that would change everything. It was Lisa, the woman he had met on the bench weeks earlier. Her voice trembled as she explained that she had been evicted from her apartment. The words struck a chord within Thomas, a reminder of the struggles he had fought so hard to overcome. He was faced with a dilemma. Should he help her, risking his own financial stability, or should he prioritize his own precarious situation? In that moment, he felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He knew he could not turn his back on someone in need. "I'll help you," he said resolutely, though he felt a knot of anxiety twist in his stomach. It was a decision that would stretch his already limited resources thin, but he refused to let fear dictate his actions. The next day he met Lisa, and together they searched for a temporary solution. They found a shelter that offered a safe haven, but it was only a band-aid on a much deeper wound. As they worked to secure a more permanent arrangement, the friendship between Thomas and Lisa blossomed. She became a source of inspiration, reminding him of the strength that could be found in vulnerability and community. Yet amid their growing bond, the pressure of his own situation loomed larger. The record deal was still on the table, but now he faced a new internal conflict. how to balance his ambition with his desire to help others. As the weeks went by, the emotional toll began to manifest physically. Thomas found himself fatigued, his eyes haunted by sleepless nights. He was caught in a cycle of self-doubt, pushing himself to create while grappling with the weight of responsibility towards Lisa. The pressure of being a beacon of hope for her and the expectations of a burgeoning music career felt like a tightrope, walk without a safety net. Meanwhile, Alan's concerns deepened. He watched as Thomas struggled, feeling helpless as his friend spiraled deeper into uncertainty. Alan's worry turned into frustration, causing him to pull away. "You're losing yourself in this, Thomas. You can't save everyone," he said one evening, his voice tinged with desperation. Their friendship, once a source of strength, now felt strained, and the silence that filled the spaces between them was deafening. With each passing day, Thomas felt the ground beneath him shift. He was no longer just a musician. He was a man entwined in a web of expectations, friendship, and the haunting memories of his past. The inner turmoil was relentless, and he began to question if he was strong enough to navigate the complexities of his choices. At a critical juncture, just when he thought he might break, a turning point occurred. Lisa, in a moment of raw honesty, shared her own struggles with self-worth and fear. "I look at you," she said, her voice shaky but determined, "and I see someone who has survived. I need to know how you do it. How do you keep going when everything feels too heavy?" Her question struck a chord within him. It was a moment of clarity, a reminder that he wasn't alone in his battles. He realized that they were both fighting to reclaim their narratives. Inspired by her courage, Thomas decided to put pen to paper once more, this time with a renewed sense of purpose. He began to write a song that encapsulated both their journeys, a tribute to resilience in the face of adversity. As he poured his heart into the music, a sense of liberation washed over him. The act of creation became a cathartic release, allowing him to confront his fears and embrace his vulnerability. It was a necessary step, not just for himself, but for Lisa, who had become a symbol of hope in his life. The next day, he called Alan, ready to mend their fractured friendship. "I need you, man," he admitted, vulnerability creeping into his voice. "I can't do this alone." Their conversation opened the door to healing, and they agreed to collaborate on the new song. Alan's unwavering support reignited Thomas's faith in their friendship, reminding him of the importance of connection in times of struggle. As Thomas prepared to share his new creation at an upcoming open mic night, the weight of expectation felt lighter. The support from Lisa and Alan had fortified him, and he understood that his journey was not just about personal success. It was about the impact he could have on others. This pivotal shift marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one where he could embrace both ambition and authenticity. The challenges ahead would still be formidable, but he felt prepared to face them. The world of music was vast and unpredictable, yet he was ready to carve his own path, one that honored not just his experiences, but the connections he had forged along the way. With every note he played, he could feel the flames of his past receding, replaced by the warmth of hope and purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but Thomas was no longer afraid to walk it. He had learned that the true power of music lay not in perfection, but in the raw, unfiltered truth of the human experience, and he was ready to share that truth with the world. As Thomas prepared for the open mic night, his heart raced with anticipation and dread. The cafe was buzzing with energy. Patrons mingled, laughter echoed, and musicians strummed their instruments in a cacophony of sound. Yet, amidst the chaos, Thomas felt a profound stillness within himself, a sense that he was on the brink of something monumental. It was then that the transformative event unfolded. Just as he was about to take the stage, he spotted Lisa standing at the back of the room, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. She was clutching her phone, and Thomas could see the distress etched across her features. She rushed toward him, her breath coming in quick bursts. "Thomas, you need to see this," she said, her voice trembling. He followed her outside, the cool night air hitting him like a wave. Lisa turned the phone toward him, and Thomas felt the ground shift beneath his feet. The video that played showed a local charity event where he had performed just weeks before. Only, this time, the camera had captured something unexpected. A seemingly innocuous comment he had made about the struggles of artists in the industry had been taken out of context and twisted to suggest he was belittling the very community he aimed to uplift. Panic surged through him as he processed the implications. The backlash had begun before he even had a chance to respond, with social media exploding with accusations and outrage. He could feel the eyes of the cafe patrons on him, their whispers a haunting reminder of the precariousness of his position. It was a moment that felt like an avalanche, burying him under the weight of public scrutiny and judgment. Emotionally, Thomas was unprepared for the tidal wave of feelings that crashed over him. Anger boiled within, but it was quickly overshadowed by a paralyzing fear. How could this happen? He had worked so hard to carve out a space for his authentic voice, and now it felt as if that voice was being hijacked. His stomach churned, and he felt lightheaded as self-doubt clawed at him. Had he really been that careless? Was he really the person they were accusing him of being? As he stood there, Lisa's hand on his shoulder offered a small comfort amid the storm. "You have to address this, Thomas. You can't let it define you," she urged, her own fear evident but tempered by a fierce determination. Her words struck a chord within him, igniting a flicker of resolve amidst the chaos. He had to take control of the narrative before it spiraled further out of reach. The realization that he needed to confront the situation head-on was a turning point, shifting the course of his journey in ways he hadn't anticipated. He could no longer remain passive, letting the industry dictate his path. Instead, he would reclaim his voice, not just for himself, but for those who felt silenced by misunderstanding and prejudice. In the days that followed, Thomas felt the emotional toll of the situation weighing heavily on his shoulders. He experienced moments of despair, questioning whether he had enough strength to combat the storm. Yet as he reflected on Lisa's unwavering support and the friendships he had nurtured, he began to understand the power of community. Together, they could weather this tempest. Determined to take action, Thomas organized a press conference, ready to share his side of the story. The event was set for a week later, and he spent every waking moment preparing for it. He wrote and rewrote his statement, pouring his heart into every word while grappling with the fear of being misunderstood once again. Each draft was an exercise in vulnerability and honesty, a testament to his commitment to authenticity. On the day of the press conference, he felt a mix of anticipation and dread as he stepped into the bright lights of the room filled with reporters and cameras. The weight of expectation hung in the air, but he knew this was his moment to reclaim his narrative. As he spoke, he felt the fear dissipate, replaced by a powerful sense of purpose. He articulated the importance of dialogue and understanding, emphasizing that his intention had always been to uplift, not undermine. The emotional release was cathartic. With each word, he could feel the chains of doubt begin to break. He was no longer just a victim of circumstance. He was an advocate, standing tall against the tide of misunderstanding. The applause that followed felt like a balm for his wounds, a reminder that while the journey ahead would still be fraught with challenges, he was not alone. In the wake of the conference, new possibilities emerged. Thomas received messages of support from artists and fans alike, their encouragement helping him to navigate the turbulent waters. He realized that this moment had galvanized not only his own resolve, but had sparked conversations about accountability and representation within the industry. It was a chance to reshape the narrative, to advocate for a more inclusive dialogue. However, the challenges were far from over. As he began to rebuild his reputation, he also faced the consequences of his earlier decisions. Some industry figures turned their backs, unwilling to forgive what they perceived as a misstep. The road ahead was uncertain, and he was acutely aware of the risks involved in staying true to himself in an unforgiving landscape. Yet with every challenge, Thomas felt a renewed sense of determination. He had not only confronted the external backlash, but had also faced the internal fears that had haunted him for too long. The experience had reshaped his perspective, allowing him to embrace both his ambition and the responsibility that came with it. As he continued to work on new music, he found inspiration in the very struggles that had once threatened to consume him. The songs began to reflect not just his personal journey, but the collective experiences of those around him. He was no longer just telling his story. He was amplifying the voices of others who had felt marginalized or misunderstood. In that sense, the turning point marked a profound transformation. It was not just a moment of crisis, but a catalyst for growth, pushing him to reevaluate his goals and priorities. Thomas was no longer merely an artist seeking success. He had become a conduit for change, using his platform to advocate for authenticity and inclusivity within the music industry. With each performance, he felt the depth of his connection to the audience grow stronger, fueled by the understanding that music could be a powerful force for healing and solidarity. He was prepared to face whatever came next, knowing that he had the strength to navigate the complexities of his journey, armed with the knowledge that his voice mattered and that it could inspire others to find theirs as well. As the days turned into a blur of rehearsals and media appearances, Thomas felt the weight of the world pressing heavily on his chest. Each morning, the sunlight filtered through his window, illuminating the remnants of his fear and doubt. He could still hear the echo of accusations that had reverberated through the community, each one a reminder of the precariousness of his position. Yet amid the turmoil, he found himself on a path of unexpected clarity and resolve. The press conference had been a turning point, but the aftermath had revealed cracks in his support system. Some of his friends had distanced themselves, unsure of how to navigate the backlash or what it meant for their own careers. While others, like Lisa, stood steadfast, ready to rally behind him, Thomas sensed a lingering uncertainty in the air. The stakes were high, and the fear of failure loomed larger than ever, threatening to overshadow the progress he had made. In the days leading up to his next performance, a highly publicized showcase that could either restore his reputation or seal his fate, Thomas immersed himself in preparation. He spent hours perfecting his set list, pouring every ounce of emotion into the songs that would give voice to his struggles. But it wasn't just the music he needed to prepare. He knew he had to confront the very doubts that had plagued him since the fallout began. One evening, he found himself alone in his small, cluttered studio, the walls adorned with posters and memorabilia, remnants of his journey as an artist. He sat in the dim light, guitar in hand, and began to play a new song, a piece that captured not only his pain, but also his resilience. With each chord, he allowed himself to process the whirlwind of emotions, the anger, the fear, and the hope. It was a cathartic release, a moment of reflection that brought him closer to the core of who he was. As he strummed the last note, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had to remember why he started making music in the first place: to connect, to inspire, and to tell stories that mattered. This was not just about him. It was about the community that had embraced him and the conversations that needed to be had. The night before the performance, Thomas gathered his closest allies for an impromptu meeting. Lisa was there, her unwavering support a source of strength. So too were a few fellow musicians who had faced their own battles. Each had their own stories of overcoming adversity, and together they formed a circle of solidarity, ready to confront the challenges ahead. As they shared their experiences, Thomas felt a sense of camaraderie blossoming among them. Differences faded as they united for a common purpose, affirming their commitment to stand together against the prevailing narratives that sought to divide them. They all faced the risk of backlash, yet they chose to support one another, sharing laughter and encouragement as they prepared for the next day's challenge. But just as the meeting was winding down, an unexpected event shifted the dynamics entirely. A well-known artist, someone who had initially distanced himself from Thomas, reached out with an offer. He wanted to join Thomas on stage during the performance, lending his voice to the message of inclusivity and understanding. This artist, once an adversary in the eyes of the public, had chosen to stand in solidarity. Thomas was taken aback by the gesture. He had expected criticism, but here was an opportunity to transform the narrative from one of division to one of unity. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the chance to show that despite the controversies, the community could come together to uplift one another. With this unexpected ally by his side, Thomas felt a surge of confidence. As the day of the performance arrived, the weight of anticipation hung in the air. Thomas could feel the energy of the crowd before he even stepped onto the stage, the murmurs of the audience creating a backdrop of tension that matched his racing heart. He took a deep breath, recalling the faces of his friends and the words of encouragement they had shared. But as he stood backstage, a wave of doubt washed over him. What if he faltered? What if the crowd turned against him once again? He closed his eyes and took a moment to reflect, grounding himself in the lessons learned throughout this journey. This was not just about redemption, it was about authenticity and using his voice to advocate for those who felt voiceless. The lights dimmed and the crowd erupted into applause as he stepped into the spotlight. With each note he played, he felt the fear dissipate, replaced by an overwhelming sense of purpose. The music flowed through him like a lifeline, connecting him to the audience in a way he had never experienced before. As he began to share his story through song, he could see the faces of those who had faced similar struggles, illuminated by the stage lights, their eyes reflecting understanding and empathy. When the time came for his unexpected ally to join him, the energy in the room shifted. Together, they sang a duet that spoke of resilience, community, and the importance of standing together against adversity. The lyrics resonated deeply, echoing the very essence of their shared experience. As they harmonized, the crowd responded with cheers, a wave of support that enveloped Thomas and fueled his determination. In that moment, he understood the true power of solidarity. It was more than just a performance. It was a declaration of unity and a challenge to the misconceptions that had threatened to tear them apart. The emotional weight of the past few weeks began to lift, replaced by a sense of belonging and purpose that he had long yearned for. Yet, as the final notes faded, Thomas knew the confrontation was far from over. There would still be those who resisted change, who clung to their preconceived notions. But now, with the strength of his allies beside him and the support of the community behind him, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the aftermath of the performance, as the applause faded and the lights dimmed, Thomas found clarity in the chaos. He had transformed his pain into art, and in doing so, he had united voices that had long been silenced. The journey was just beginning, but he was no longer alone. Together, they would continue to push for understanding and inclusivity, proving That even in the darkest moments, the light of solidarity could shine brightly, illuminating a path toward change. As Thomas stood on the stage, the bright lights dazzling his vision, he could feel the anticipation of the crowd pressing against him like a physical weight. The energy in the room was electric, but beneath it lay an undercurrent of tension that threatened to pull him under. He was acutely aware of the stakes. This performance was more than just a showcase of his talent. It was the culmination of a battle for his reputation and the validation of his voice in a world that had tried to silence him. His heart raced as he thought about the critical moment ahead. He had to prove to not only the audience, but also to himself that he was worthy of the support he had received. The unexpected collaboration with the well-known artist had stirred a mixture of excitement and anxiety within him. While the alliance was powerful, it also carried the weight of expectations. What if he stumbled? What if the audience rejected him again? As the opening notes of his first song filled the air, Thomas took a deep breath, letting the music wash over him. He poured every ounce of emotion he had into his performance, channeling the struggles, the pain, and the strength he had gathered throughout this journey. With each chord, he felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. The audience swayed, their energy palpable, and for a moment he lost himself in the music. But as he transitioned into the duet with his ally, the atmosphere shifted. Just as they began to harmonize, a loud commotion erupted from the back of the venue. A group of protesters, carrying signs and shouting accusations, had forced their way in, their voices piercing through the melody. "Fraud," one of them yelled. "You don't represent us!" The words cut through Thomas like a knife, and for a brief moment he felt his confidence waver. The audience began to murmur, the cheers turning into confused whispers. Thomas's heart sank. The very thing he had feared was happening right before his eyes. The crowd was divided. He could feel the weight of his allies' support behind him, yet the presence of dissent threatened to unravel everything he had worked for. In that split second, a choice crystallized before him. He could succumb to the fear and let the negativity overshadow the message he was trying to convey, or he could confront the dissent head-on with the strength he had cultivated throughout his journey. This was a moment that demanded courage, and he was not about to back down. With a deep breath, Thomas stepped forward, breaking away from the duet. The spotlight caught his face, and he locked eyes with the protesters. "I hear you," he shouted, his voice steady despite the chaos surrounding him. "I understand your anger, your frustration. I've felt it too, but I stand here today not to divide, but to unite. We all have stories to tell, and that's what matters." The crowd fell silent, the tension palpable. His vulnerability hung in the air, and for a moment, he felt the weight of the world shift. He wasn't just performing. He was engaging in a conversation, inviting everyone to be part of a dialogue that transcended the music. With newfound determination, he continued, "This music is for all of us. It's about breaking barriers and finding common ground, even when it feels impossible." He gestured to his ally, who nodded in agreement, stepping forward to lend his voice to the moment. Together, they began to sing a verse that celebrated their differences, the lyrics weaving a tapestry of hope and resilience. As the notes soared, Thomas could see the crowd beginning to react. Some people in the audience were swaying, others were nodding their heads, and a few even began to clap along, embracing the message he was trying to share. In that moment, he realized the power of authenticity. By standing firm in his truth, he had turned the tide. The protesters, still rooted in their anger, were momentarily quieted by the music. As the song reached its crescendo, Thomas felt an overwhelming wave of support from the crowd. The cheers grew louder, resonating with a unified spirit that seemed to push back against the negativity. As the final notes rang out, he looked out into the sea of faces, some smiling, some deep in thought. but all connected by the shared experience of the moment. He had faced the greatest challenge of his career, not just the fear of rejection, but the fear of losing the very essence of what he stood for. By choosing to confront it with empathy and authenticity, he had not only salvaged the performance, but had also transformed it into a powerful statement of solidarity. The applause that erupted felt like a wave crashing against the shore, washing away the doubts that had threatened to consume him. The emotional release was cathartic, a culmination of all the lessons he had learned along the way. He had embraced his vulnerability, allowing it to fuel his strength rather than diminish it. In the aftermath, as the crowd continued to cheer, Thomas felt a profound sense of relief. The battle was far from over, but he had taken a significant step toward redefining his narrative. The connection he had forged with his allies and the audience had solidified the bond between them, a testament to the power of unity in the face of adversity. As he stepped off the stage, his heart still racing, he was met by Lisa and the other musicians who had supported him through the ordeal. They embraced him, tears of joy and pride glistening in their eyes. The joy of the moment enveloped him, and he knew they had all played a part in this victory. The night might not have erased the challenges that lay ahead, but it had illuminated a path forward, one defined by solidarity, resilience, and the unwavering belief that voices of all kinds deserved to be heard. In that moment, Thomas understood that the true power of his music lay not only in the notes he played, but in the conversations it inspired and the connections it nurtured. Together, they would continue to push for a world that embraced diversity, understanding, and acceptance, proving that even in the face of doubt, hope could flourish and change could happen. As Thomas stepped off the stage, the roar of applause still ringing in his ears, he felt a rush of emotions flood through him. The immediate aftermath of that pivotal moment was a whirlwind, filled with hugs and congratulations from Lisa and the rest of the ensemble. Their excitement was infectious, yet Thomas found himself momentarily lost in thought, grappling with the significance of what had just unfolded. The protesters, though still simmering, had retreated, their shouts drowned out by the cheers that now filled the venue. Thomas could see glimmers of acceptance starting to emerge in the faces of the audience members, many of whom had initially been uncertain. He realized that he had not only stood up for himself that night, but had also become an unintentional spokesperson for unity and understanding. In the days that followed the performance, the consequences of his actions rippled through his life and the lives of those around him. Social media buzzed with discussions about the event, and news outlets picked up the story. Thomas found himself at the center of conversations about representation in the music industry, about the importance of listening to diverse voices, and about the need for solidarity in the face of dissent. He had sparked a movement, albeit unintentionally, that resonated far beyond those few minutes on stage. Reflecting on his journey, Thomas felt a profound sense of transformation. He had started as a timid artist, consumed by self-doubt and the fear of rejection. But now he stood tall, aware of the power he wielded through his music. The experience illuminated the path he wanted to take, one where he could use his voice to advocate for those who felt unheard, to bridge divides, and to foster a spirit of collaboration. He remembered nights spent alone, doubting whether he would ever be accepted, and how far he had come since then. The lessons he had learned about vulnerability, courage, and the strength of community were etched in his mind, shaping his vision for the future. Lisa, who had been his unwavering support throughout this journey, also experienced a shift. Witnessing Thomas's bravery instilled a newfound confidence in her. She began to share her own stories more openly, stepping into the spotlight not just as a backup singer, but as a powerful voice in her own right. The bond between them deepened, transforming from a mentor-mentee relationship into a partnership founded on mutual respect and shared experiences. They began collaborating more closely, crafting songs that reflected their collective journeys, creating a musical dialogue that resonated with their audience. Others in the ensemble also found their own voices through Thomas's actions. The sense of solidarity strengthened their connection, leading to brainstorming sessions filled with creativity and innovation. They understood that together they could challenge norms and expectations, that their diverse backgrounds enriched the music they created. Each member began to shine in their own right, emboldened by the idea that they were all part of something larger than themselves. The impact of Thomas's performance rippled through the community as well. Local activists reached out, eager to collaborate on projects that promoted inclusivity and social justice. Thomas became involved in initiatives that aimed to give a platform to marginalized voices, using his influence to advocate for change. He realized that his art had the potential to spark conversations and inspire action, and he was determined to harness that power. As he navigated this new chapter, Thomas recognized the importance of maintaining balance. Success was no longer solely measured in accolades or ticket sales. It was about meaningful connections and the impact he could have on the world around him. He took moments to reflect on his values, ensuring that his ambition aligned with his desire to uplift others. The music industry was a competitive arena, but he was more focused on creating a legacy of compassion and understanding than on chasing fleeting fame. In quiet moments, Thomas often found himself contemplating the journey that had brought him to this point. He had experienced the highs of triumph and the lows of rejection, but through it all, he had discovered resilience within himself. The ability to turn fear into strength, vulnerability into power, and dissent into dialogue was a profound realization. He understood that personal growth was not a destination, but an ongoing journey, one that required continuous reflection and adaptation. As he prepared for the next steps in his career, Thomas felt optimistic. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities alike, but he was ready. He envisioned a future where his music could continue to be a force for good, where he could lead conversations that challenged the status quo, and where he could inspire others to embrace their own stories. The final moments of that performance had not only reshaped his career, but had altered the trajectory of his life. Thomas had found his voice, and in doing so had encouraged others to find theirs. With a renewed sense of purpose, he was ready to step into the next chapter, armed with the knowledge that together they could create a world where every voice mattered. As Thomas reflected on the whirlwind that had become his life, he stood on the edge of a new beginning. In the wake of his performance, he had not only gained recognition, but had also sparked a deeper conversation about acceptance and the power of diverse voices in music. The echoes of the applause still reverberated in his mind, but it was the shared stories of those he had touched that resonated even more profoundly. Lisa, now confidently stepping into her own spotlight, had become an integral part of this journey. Together, they had crafted songs that told their stories, the struggles, the triumphs, and the moments of vulnerability that made them human. Their collaboration was more than just music. It was a testament to the strength they found in each other. Lisa's voice soared alongside Thomas's, a perfect harmony that symbolized their shared mission to uplift others. As the ensemble continued to grow, each member began to find their footing, inspired by the movement Thomas had inadvertently ignited. They became a family, bonded not just by music, but by the shared goal of challenging the status quo. The late-night jam sessions turned into brainstorming meetings, where ideas flowed freely and creativity thrived. Each voice mattered, And in that realization, they found power. The local community, initially divided by the protest, began to heal through the conversations sparked by Thomas's performance. Activists reached out, eager to collaborate on projects that bridged divides and built understanding. Thomas embraced this new role, using his influence to advocate for change. Knowing that his platform came with a responsibility, he organized events that celebrated diversity, inviting artists from all backgrounds to share their stories and talents. In these moments, Thomas felt a profound sense of purpose. The music industry, once a source of anxiety and self-doubt, transformed into a landscape filled with potential for connection and growth. He had learned that true success was not measured by accolades, but by the impact he could have on the world around him. As he prepared for an upcoming concert, one that would be streamed to an audience far beyond their small venue, Thomas took a moment to reflect. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the fears that had once held him back, and the resilience he had discovered within himself. He knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but he felt ready to face them. He was not alone. He had his community, his friends, and his music to guide him. The day of the concert arrived, and the energy in the venue was electric. Thomas stood backstage, the familiar flutter of nerves dancing in his stomach. But as he looked out at the audience, he saw familiar faces, friends, family, supporters, and even a few who had once protested against him. He felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. This was not just about him, it was about everyone in that room and the stories they carried. When it was time for him to step onto the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. But it was the silence that followed when he began to sing that struck him the most. He poured his heart into every note, sharing not just his story, but the stories of those who had inspired him along the way. In that moment, he understood the true essence of music, the power to heal, to connect, and to inspire change. As the final chords rang out, the audience erupted into cheers, but Thomas felt something deeper. He sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a collective understanding that they were all part of something greater than themselves. It was not just a celebration of music, it was a celebration of unity, acceptance, and the journey they all shared. In the months that followed, the impact of that concert continued to resonate. Thomas and his ensemble embarked on a tour, sharing their music and message with audiences across the country, each performance building on the last, creating a ripple effect of change. They inspired countless individuals to embrace their own stories, to speak out, and to stand together in solidarity. As Thomas looked towards the future, he envisioned a world where every voice mattered, where diversity was celebrated, and where music became a universal language that united rather than divided. He felt a renewed sense of hope, knowing that they were all part of a movement that could change lives. In those quiet moments of reflection, Thomas realized that his journey was far from over. It was an ongoing process of growth and discovery, and he was excited about what lay ahead. He understood that the road would be filled with challenges, but he was ready to embrace them with open arms, knowing he had the support of his community and the strength of his convictions. As he stood on the precipice of this new chapter, he felt a profound gratitude for the lessons learned along the way. The performance that had once terrified him had transformed into a powerful catalyst for change, not just in his life, but in the lives of so many others. And with that, he felt inspired to continue spreading the message that every voice, no matter how quiet or loud, deserved to be heard. In the end, Thomas knew that life was about more than just personal achievement. It was about lifting others and creating spaces where everyone could thrive. He had found his voice, and in doing so, he had empowered others to find theirs. As the last notes of the concert lingered in the air, Thomas smiled, knowing that the journey was just beginning. The world had opened up before him, filled with possibilities and hope. Together, they would create a future where every story mattered, where music could heal wounds, and where love and acceptance reigned. And so, as he stepped into the spotlight once again, he carried with him the weight of his journey and the light of a new dawn, ready to inspire and be inspired. What a powerful reminder that our voices can ignite change, that our stories can unite us, and that the journey of self-discovery is one worth sharing. How has this story resonated with you? Have you ever felt the power of your voice? Let's continue this conversation in the comments below. If you found inspiration in Thomas's journey, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can create a world where every voice is valued. Subscribe for more stories that uplift and inspire, because the journey doesn't stop here.